chosen ones. Stop scrolling. God has reserved a throne and a crown for you, but before you reach it, let's listen to its story. Once upon a time, on the peak of a distant mountain, in a place where no material wealth could reach, there was a crown that only those whose hearts were filled with light could see. All kings and nobles were in pursuit of this crown, believing that it was not adorned with earthly jewels. Instead, it shimmered with an energy touched by invisible hands, and whoever possessed this crown would have every wish granted. To obtain this crown, God had established 7 qualities. It didn't matter how wealthy or powerful you were. Only those who possessed these 7 conditions could claim the crown. Each of you is a part of this path, a piece of cosmic harmony. Now I will tell you these 7 signs. If you are watching this video, it must mean something. And if you have felt the light of the crown, it's time to awaken your energy. Write 77 in the comments and activate your energy. Now get ready for profound insights belonging to the chosen ones. Because on this journey, you are not alone, and you will feel God watching over you every moment. Your crown is waiting for you. To understand our first quality, you need to hear Mike's story. Mike was living an ordinary life. He lived in a small, simple house, and his closest friend was his cat, Misty. Misty was not just a pet for Mike. She was a silent companion who listened to all his burdens, even in his darkest times. Mike's life hadn't been easy. There were hardships, obstacles, losses, but Misty was always by his side, representing the silent strength that calmed Mike's spirit. One morning, everything changed for Mike. That morning, Misty did not come home. Mike searched for his cat everywhere, roaming the streets, checking every corner. He was left with a deep emptiness inside. Misty's absence was not just the loss of a friend for Mike. It felt like losing a piece that gave him peace and eased his loneliness. After this loss, Mike fell into a deep depression. He began to question the meaning of his life. As difficulties piled up, he felt completely lost. Over time, Mike began to learn how to cope with this pain. Although Misty's absence dragged him into deep sorrow, he realized deep down that this loss had taught him resilience. Just as the chosen ones are strengthened by being tested with hardships, Mike was growing spiritually through this process. What he initially saw as a weakness was actually making him stronger. One day, while sitting in his garden, Mike looked up at the sky. For the first time in a long while, he felt the silence and peace within him. It was as if something was comforting him, an inner strength, giving him the power to endure. At that moment, he realized that the losses and hardships in his life were transforming him into a better person. Everything had a reason. Challenges were signs on the path of the chosen ones. Each obstacle pointed to a greater purpose. And then, the crown. The reward for Mike's endurance through all these hardships was seeing the crown, a divine symbol. This crown was incomparable to any gold or jewels in the world. It had no material value, but for Mike, it was the greatest reward of a divine journey. This crown was a reflection of all Mike's pains and resilience. The spiritual journey that began with Misty's loss had made Mike stronger, wiser, and more faithful. For the chosen ones, hardships always open the doors to growth and transformation. Like Mike, every loss and every pain is an opportunity to take one step closer to their spiritual crowns, and those who deserve the crown always continue to walk this path with patience and faith. But those who deserve the crown have one more quality, and since you've watched this far, you already possess it. Now let's learn what that quality is. Emma was a young woman. lost in the chaos of life. Throughout the years, she had been chasing after something: a better career, stronger relationships, more success. But no matter how much she struggled, the emptiness inside her never seemed to fill. At night, when she lay down, her mind kept racing, unable to find peace. During the day, she was always in a hurry, chasing the next goal. Yet amidst all this hustle, Emma's soul whispered that something was missing. One day, she decided to attend a meditation workshop held in the city. Maybe this is the way to quiet my mind and find peace, she thought. At first, meditation was a disappointment for her. Her mind wouldn't stop. Thoughts kept flowing one after another. Calming down seemed almost impossible. However, when the instructor said that patience was the greatest key, Emma took a deep breath and committed herself to the process. Although she made no progress in the first few sessions, she didn't give up. She continued to meditate every day patiently. No matter how restless her mind was, she always returned and focused on her breath. Months passed, and Emma began to deepen her meditation. She no longer got lost in her thoughts and felt a little more peace with each breath. Gradually, she started to enjoy the silence within her. This process not only changed Emma's mind, but also transformed her life. She stopped being hasty in her work, became more patient and understanding in her relationships. As she discovered her inner calm, the storms of the external world affected her less. The new life she built with patience became like a spiritual sanctuary for her. One morning, while meditating, Emma entered a very deep trance. There were no thoughts left in her mind, only peace. She focused on her breath, journeying to the center of her being. At that moment, a light appeared before her eyes. The light was bright and strong, but not dazzling. When she focused on this light with her inner eyes, she saw a crown. This crown was surrounded by sparkles, but it had nothing to do with the gold or jewels existing in the material world. This crown was like a piece of her soul's deepest essence. When Emma saw that crown, she was filled with a profound sense of peace and meaning. At that moment, Emma realized how patient she had been in her life, how she had learned to face every hardship with inner serenity. This crown was a sign of her spiritual journey. The inner strength she built with patience and meditation was presented to her as the reward she deserved. The crown symbolized Emma's inner calm, her patience, and her spiritual growth. The crown shown to her in the depths of meditation was not just a spiritual reward, but also a sign of the completion of a divine journey. Everything built with patience eventually turns into a spiritual reward. Instant pleasures exploit our souls, but we have one more quality, perhaps the most important one, and for this quality, I'm taking you to David's story. David was an ordinary man living in a small American town. But his heart was not ordinary. He was the most generous person in the town. He was ready to share everything he had. Whenever he saw someone in need, he didn't hesitate for a moment to help. Unfortunately, the people in the town saw his generosity as foolishness. David, the fool who doesn't think of himself, they would say. Everyone ridiculed him for helping people without expecting anything in return. Despite all the mockery, David did not deviate from the path he knew. He lived not only for himself, but also considering everyone around him. One day, David came across Jack, a man living in destitution on the outskirts of town. Jack had been forgotten by everyone for years, was sick and in need of help, but the townspeople had turned their backs on him. Seeing Jack's situation, David reached out without hesitation. He brought him food, repaired his home, and tried to cover his hospital expenses. People mocked him even more this time. Why are you wasting your efforts helping a man who doesn't even know you? David ignored these comments. His heart believed that helping others was the greatest virtue. He continued to live this way for years. Although Jack's health did not improve, David kept helping him whenever he could. One day, David was involved in a major traffic accident in the city center. His car had overturned, and David was trapped. No one dared to help. People around were in a panic. At that moment, Jack appeared from the crowd. Unexpectedly, Jack rushed to the car to try to save David. Years of David's help had left a mark in Jack's memory. That day, Jack did everything he could to save David's life. When the emergency teams arrived, thanks to Jack's brave efforts, David managed to survive. When David opened his eyes in the hospital, he learned that Jack had saved his life and was overwhelmed with tears. The years of being called fool for his help had actually saved his life. At that moment, David deeply understood the true value of helping others. Everything he shared had created a cycle of goodness that returned to him in his most difficult moments. At that moment, a crown appeared in David's mind. This crown was a symbol of his generosity and sacrifice. David realized that the help he gave, which everyone called foolish, was actually leading him to a divine reward. This crown was invisible in the material world, but shone brightly in the spiritual realm. David understood that he deserved the crown because of all the kindness he had shown. The journey of sharing and sacrifice for the chosen ones eventually returns to them in unexpected ways. Like David, every act of generosity is part of a divine cycle and ultimately shows that they deserve the crown. If you also love to share, a big thank you would support us in developing our community. If you have ever felt that no one understands you or that you cannot express your feelings, then this quality of those who deserve the crown definitely speaks to you. Brian was a successful and ambitious businessman living in a big city. Throughout his life, he had remained distant from others, caring only about his own success. He did everything to strengthen his position in his company, earn more money, and attain higher status. The people around him had gotten used to his stern demeanor. Brian looked down on people and found it easy to see their problems and weaknesses because he didn't try to understand them. To him, empathy was a fairy tale made up by the weak. One day, a young employee named Emily caught Brian's attention. Despite her good work, Emily was constantly making mistakes and struggling at work. Seeing her performance, Brian inwardly despised her. If she can't do the job, she deserves to leave, he thought. He approached Emily harshly, constantly putting more pressure on her. Everyone knew Emily was struggling, but instead of addressing the situation, Brian didn't hesitate to make it harder for her. Eventually, Emily suddenly resigned. Despite all his efforts, she felt crushed under the office atmosphere, especially unable to work under Brian's cold and oppressive demeanor. Emily's departure caused a minor stir in the office, but it didn't matter to Brian. To him, employees were just there to produce results. Emotions and difficulties were insignificant. However, shortly after, Brian's life began to change unexpectedly. While maintaining his successful career, Brian encountered serious health issues. He had a severe heart problem and needed surgery. The recovery process after the surgery was much tougher than he had anticipated. He was bedridden for days, feeling too weak to talk to anyone. The most painful part was having no one by his side. The strong, arrogant Brian was gone, replaced by a weak and helpless man. During this time, lying in the hospital bed, Brian began to reflect on how he had behaved in the past. He realized that he had never understood empathy and had been judging people. He remembered Emily and the difficulties she faced. For the first time, putting himself in her shoes, he understood how hard her situation was. Facing his own pain, he realized how deeply Emily felt the pressure and loneliness. As the healing process continued, Brian's internal journey deepened. He began to understand that in life, not only results, but also people's emotions and struggles were important. Empathy was a powerful emotion he had never considered before. He learned that understanding people, listening to them without judgment, and supporting them instead of seeing them as weak was necessary. When Brian returned to work after recovering, he was a different person. He started to take more interest in his employees. He began to understand and help them with their struggles. Especially when he thought of Emily, he realized how late he had learned empathy and how important this feeling was. Brian was no longer just a successful businessman. He had become a leader who valued the people around him. Brian had started his life journey as an arrogant person and crowned it with empathy. At that moment, he understood that valuing people's emotions and struggles was a spiritual reward. The true reason he deserved the crown was that he had learned empathy. And finally, we will share the last quality of those who deserve the crown with you through James's story. James was a man living in a big city, trying to keep up with the pace of life. For years, the intensity of work, endless hustles, and consecutive challenges had caused him to lose his inner peace. Everything had become a duty, an obligation for him. His relationships with people had become superficial, and he felt as if he had lost the capacity to love and connect. His dedication to work had helped him climb the career ladder, but there was a deep void in his soul. One morning, James's life changed in an unexpected way. His grandmother had fallen seriously ill and was hospitalized. Years of distant family ties had become a burden for him. Although he hadn't spent much time with his grandmother, he decided to visit the hospital. At that moment, it felt like just a responsibility, an obligation. When he arrived at the hospital, he found his grandmother lying in bed, looking weak, but still having a sparkle in her eyes. James sat by her bedside and realized how emotionally disconnected he had become over the years. His grandmother gently said, "Love heals everything." James didn't fully grasp the meaning of these words at that moment, but somehow the sentence imprinted itself deep within his heart. His grandmother reminded him of how they spent time together as a child, how she used to tell him stories. James slowly began to recall those warm and loving memories he had lost years ago. Something was awakening in his heart. A forgotten, deeply buried sense of love was slowly returning. At that moment, he realized that love was not just an emotion, but also a powerful healing force. Days passed, and James started visiting his grandmother every day. Each time, he sat by her side, read her books, and shared childhood memories. Although his grandmother became weaker each day, something inside James began to change. He realized that what he had been chasing all his life did not bring true happiness and peace. He understood that love was not just a gift we give to others, but also a way to heal ourselves. One morning, his grandmother opened her eyes and smiled at James. "The love you gave me keeps me here," she said, "but it also heals you." At that moment, James understood that every moment he spent showing love to his grandmother, every day he approached her with love, he was also healing himself. The emptiness inside him began to fill with the light of love. Shortly after, his grandmother passed away. However, James never forgot the most important thing he learned during this process. Love was a healing force stronger than anything else. Regardless of the material gains and losses, the power of love could bring people to inner peace and tranquility. After his grandmother's funeral, James decided to let more love into his life. He rebuilt family bonds, deepened his friendships, and changed his approach to work. It was no longer just about being successful, but also about approaching others with love and compassion. His greatest goal had become not just to succeed, but to connect with others through love and kindness. If you have understood the importance of these qualities, you have spiritually earned the right to receive this crown. But as the final piece of your spiritual development, you need to hear Lucas's story as well. You can click on the video that appears on the screen for that.